Well, let's talk now to a couple of MPs on equally divided sides of the referendum. Andrea Jenkins, Conservative MP for Morley and Outwood. She sits on the Brexit committee and voted leave. Ian Murray is Labour MP for Edinburgh South, and he voted for Remain. Let's begin with one of the findings of the research. Ian Murray, what conclusions do you think we should draw from the breakdown which shows that the higher the levels of education, the more likely people were to have voted for Remain?
Well, that seems to me to be quite a blunt conclusion, because it could just be that people have an exposure to higher education. Let me give you an example. There were some wards in my own constituent of Edinburgh South that were 90% Remain. These wards are populated by people who work in Edinburgh University, one of the world's top universities. They get a huge amount of research funding from the EU. Their students know that they can use Erasmus and the exposure they have to the EU and those kinds of issues. 30% of their staff are EU nationals. So it's maybe not in the sense of the grades that you get when you come out of school or university, but actually just the exposure to higher education institutions who do that collaboration across the EU. Which means that people are more likely to vote to Remain.
Yeah, which would make sense from the people we heard in Cambridge as well. Well, Andrew Jenkins, what do you think about this? Because we heard from one of those people in Cambridge saying that she thought people voted Remain because they had more informed opinion and less channeling reactionary newspapers, what she said.
I was actually more concerned what the gentleman was saying, actually. Right, it's interesting data, but if we look at, it's no different really, and it's not surprising because look at the Centre of Social Justice Ed, their report last October produced something similar, and it also, the October report suggested that, most people over the age of 44 backed Leave. And so I don't think personally it's driven by education. I think my own view is that, society has been promised a referendum in some form and to have a voice by successive governments, whether it's, Brown or even, Clegg involved in the coalition and David Cameron. And they've finally had a voice with this government. And I think it's been their chance to, stand up and say, look, take notice. I can actually help chart the future of this country. So I think it's more driven by that, really. I mean, I come from a normal sort of working class background, but I got a degree. I'm doing an MPhil at the moment as a mature student. It doesn't make me, and I'm a leaver. So there's always some outliers. And if you also look at the statistics as well, if you look at South Buckinghamshire, that was 50.7% Leave, and Chiltern was 55% Leave. But therefore, those two areas, it was mixed social groups, richer and less well off, and different education groups. So there's always some outliers, really.
And Ian Murray, I suppose as well, there could be the argument that unskilled workers are the people who are more likely to be concerned about being left behind by globalisation.
Well, absolutely. That's the key to this. And I think the gentleman who spoke in Middlesbrough said quite clearly that he felt as if the EU and the current Conservative government had done nothing for the area. He felt it was difficult to get work. There is a real kick at the government here. So there's a huge plethora of reasons why people would have voted the way they did. It seems that particular gentleman felt left behind by globalisation and nobody was listening to him. And that would probably be the same thing across the country. And indeed, it was the same in my own constituency, even though 78% voted Remain. So there's a huge amount of work to be done here. I don't think that leaving the European Union, whether it turns out good, bad or indifferent, is going to resolve those issues. Those issues are going to have to be resolved by the respective governments of UK and Scotland in terms of those social issues, those access to P1 places, those access to good jobs, progression in the workplace, feelings of people have a stake in society. Those are key things for domestic governments, and the pressure's now on the domestic governments to deliver.
And Andrew Jenkins, you mentioned the generational differences, and your constituency was divided as well. Is it going to be difficult to heal those divisions?
I don't think so. I think the important thing we need to focus on is, it's been a democratic vote, and also that we've had millions of people who are engaging sometime for the first time ever. So we need to take the positives out of this and stop talking it down and show that we are listening and get the best deal for all sections of society and for Britain as a whole. And
as we come to a series possibly of votes in Parliament about how this should proceed, the issue of Brexit. What do you think about the idea, Andrew Jenkins, about people are talking about, many backbenchers, about wanting a meaningful vote?
I just think we need to get on with it, really. You know, the government's published a white paper. I myself are happy with the white paper, and let's just get on with it. You know, let's stop filibustering. You know, we've got a country to run. We've got a future, new future to chart. So let's get on with it, really.
Briefly, Ian Murray.
Well, the government have produced a white paper, but they would have been better off just to make the paper white. It's the same as the Scottish independence referendum. They've written a whole load of words that doesn't really mean something. And I think the amendments that are going through to the bill this week, we would expect the government to at least look seriously at those in terms of EU nationals, in terms of being able to get as close as access to the single market as possible, and make sure that we can have those rights that we enjoy maintained. Those are sensible amendments. The government would do well to heed them.
Ian Murray, Andrea Jenkins.